Welcome to On Work and Revolution, where we talk about what's shaking up in the world of work right now, and there's a lot, and mostly how we can make work life suck a little less. For people who know me, they know that I'm trying to go for a little higher bar than that. I wanted to create amazing workplace, but for some, suck less isn't such a bad deal right now. I'm your host, Debbie Goodman, and today we have the amazing Niven Postma as our guest. Niven is one of the foremost global experts in organizational politics and author of the best-selling book, If You Don't Do Politics, Politics Will Do You, a guide to navigating office politics ethically and successfully. So that's what we're talking about, office and corporate politics. So this book is an absolute must-read. It'll absolutely, completely change and blow your mind. So while you're listening to this, listeners, do a quick Google and download it on Kindle or make a plan to get this book. I'll include the information in the show notes. Niven is not just a consultant and a strategist. She's actually had firsthand experience in the trenches, which is why her book and her work and her knowledge is so real and impressive. There are very few women that I know who have had careers that have spanned publicly traded companies, nonprofits, and government institutions. Niven's done it all. She's an international speaker, a contributor to Harvard Business Review. She's been awarded the Archbishop Tutu Leadership Fellowship, and she's currently doing her PhD. So welcome, Niven.
Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, if you didn't gather it, today we are properly talking about office politics. We're going to dig into that. It's the thing that everybody says they hate, they don't do, they want to avoid, or they feel the victims of. So if everyone's saying, not me, who's doing the politicking?
Let's start with why people feel that way. And, I have lectured to all manner of people at all levels in organizations all over the world. And what I've realized is that we actually, and I include myself for most of my career, Debbie, we actually do not understand what office politics are. And in fact, the literature and the academic research has also changed in the last 20 years, because it used to be only the toxic, the Machiavellian, the backstabbing, the brown-nosing, the handbag carrying was a word I heard used the other day. Thought that was hilarious. So all of this kind of inauthentic, ingratiating, toxic stuff. But in fact, the understanding of how human beings work and how organizations work has really expanded to understand that it's the full range of how we engage informally in organizations. And we all do it, and all organizations have it. So it's how we use the informal, the unofficial, the behind-the-scenes spaces, the meetings before the meetings, the conversations after the meetings, the picking up the phone just to check in on how something went, to ask for information, to get support, all manner of things. So it's this full range of how we show up. And in fact, in that range, yes, you can be a psychopath, but you can also be incredibly ethical and use the reality of this to your advantage. So to the second part of your question, who's doing this? Well, actually, I think what most people realize after they've been through a workshop is, I'm doing it. But I just never called it politics because, of course, I'm a good person. And it's only psychopaths who engage in this stuff. And the moment they start to think about either their activities or the activities of people they admire, managing stakeholders, building up a reputation, sponsoring people unofficially, they suddenly realize, politics is pretty much what I've been doing, but I've called it something else, or I've never seen it as that.
Okay, so we usually use the term office or corporate politics to describe something that's negative or toxic or harmful. And in actual fact, it sounds like the way you're describing it, it's the strategy of how we get about, how we engage in our workplace sometimes just in order to be effective and impactful.
Absolutely. It's about how we build up four things. So how we build up our political capital, and that capital comprises your strategic relationships. So the people who can have your back when you need it, who can open doors, give you access to information. It's about your power. It's about your influence, and it's about your reputation. And so how you accrue those, how you leverage those, how you develop those to your advantage and to the advantage of your team. And essentially it is about getting things done. I mean, that's what we got to work to do. We got to work to get things done and to grow people. And the smarter you are politically and the more political capital you can deploy, well, the more you're going to be able to do of both.
So I'm imagining that you dove into this interesting, possibly murky area because you had a brush or two yourself.
Yes.
Are you open to sharing a story of the being in the ring?
I had a facilitator on a leadership development program that I was lecturing on a while ago, and I loved how she said it when I was very frank, sharing my brush with politics. And she said, well, this is the lovely thing, Niven, is that in sharing your experience in the middle of a successful career, you legitimize and you normalize failure. I'm not sure that it's failure, but it certainly was a crucible experience. And so I think these crucible experiences are important ones to share. And I think there were two. One was when I was working for a toxic manager, and I've fortunately only ever had that once in my career. But the headbutting politically that happened and the kind of contagion effect from that experience and my resisting what was going on, and then how it damaged my reputation and how I became somebody nobody wanted to engage with.
I can't believe that.
Oh, yeah, no, Debbie, when and if we see each other again in person, I'll open up a bottle of wine and I'll tell you the whole long, sad story. But for this, I'll just keep to the basics. And then the second one was really when I overestimated my leverage. And when I talk about career suicide, this is one of the things I talk about. So I had enormous leverage. I haven't looked for a role since my very first one. As with all my roles, I've been headhunted into this. I've been headhunted on the basis of my experience and my track record. And so I had an enormous amount of leverage, no question. And I had a whole bunch of support and I had a big mandate. But I didn't have quite as much as I thought. And so I really overplayed my hand in saying what needed to change. And really pretty much from 1 week to the next, things changed quite drastically. And the person that I was reporting into, who was very senior on Exco, called me in on a Friday and said, look, it's been absolutely fabulous having you here, Niven. And yes, I know we had your performance evaluation about 2 months ago and it was glowing and we thought you were the bee's knees, and you really, really are. But we're going to move all of this work back into business as usual. And so it's Friday today. You don't need to come to work on Monday. And here is a retrenchment letter. And so thanks very much, but the position's now redundant, and no, so are you. I remember it was in November. I remember walking out of the building. I remember what I was wearing and phoning my partner and being off the charts delighted, saying, I've just been retrenched. I was so happy because it was becoming an intractable situation. And of course, retrenchment is a hugely traumatic experience for many people. For me, it wasn't. They paid me a lot of money to go. And so I thought, well, hallelujah, the situation's resolved. And it was my partner who actually had to point out to me, Niven, you haven't been retrenched. What are you talking about? Here's the letter. Here's the money in my bank. This is what I need to do in the week to hand over. No, Niv, you've been fired. No, I have not. You know what? Maybe I have. And so in that realizing, and interestingly in terms of timing, that whole experience happened at the same time as a good friend of mine was saying she needed a workshop developed for a leadership development program she runs. So she needed a day-long module on office politics. Suddenly I thought, hold on. I have been fired. So what does that mean? And what did I not know? And in not knowing, what do I need to learn? And if I can learn, I can teach. And so it was actually funny how these things happen, right? The Kierkegaard quote, life can only be understood backwards, but has to be lived forwards. It was really a catalytic moment. And experience generally.
I mean, I encounter in my role running a search firm and interviewing people who are on the edge of feeling like they have been alienated in their organizations because they might have overplayed their hand, they haven't used their leverage, or they're just a victim. It's a very confusing state for so many people because they haven't been able to see in the rearview mirror yet. They often mostly just feel a victim. And they haven't understood the dynamics of what's been at play in order to get to this situation where they may have thought of themselves as an absolutely sterling performer and have been given all the kudos and reviews and performance evaluations to prove that and to validate that for themselves, and all of a sudden find themselves completely on the back foot. In fact, that actually happened to me now that I'm thinking about it. Way back when I was still working as a professional dancer. I was in the dance company and I was the darling of the artistic director. I was called on for everything. I was like always front and center. And then seemingly overnight, something changed. And it was a devastating experience for me because I did not understand what had happened. And I was literally shunned. And my contract was discontinued, same thing, not fired, discontinued. And it was an incredibly traumatic experience for me because I did not understand it. And so I'm sure there are people listening who've experienced this, experiencing this, are seeing it as maybe we talk about, well, it's just toxic, but perhaps there's a role that they've played or just not understood what's gone on. And I'm wondering, you talk about the 5 myths of politics, corporate politics. I'm wondering if we can just dig into that, because I'm sure that almost everybody who's ever worked has somehow had a brush or a really traumatic experience with something like this.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, look, for you, it's going to be even more traumatic because it was a shock. For me, it was certainly a shock, but it was also a relief because the situation had become so unpleasant. So, yeah, I think in that shock, if you can take some time to reflect on what role you played, because a toxic environment, look, you've got to run like hell. But in every other environment, what did you not understand about that environment, about the rules? And so the 5 myths that I've distilled are ones that I think are really as universal as they are wrong and as widespread as they are naive. And when I say naive, listen, I don't wake up in the morning to go and be a cynic. Life is too short and work and the things that matter are too precious to be cynical. But somewhere between rampant idealism and cynicism and burnout is some degree of pragmatism. And so let's get pragmatic around how people and organizations work. And the first myth for me is the foundational myth, this really prevalent idea that I can either be a good person, I can have some degree of values, or I can play politics. Well, yes, of course, if you think politics are only one thing, you will think that because the one thing that they're generally seen as is dreadful. So that's the first one. And what I really try to teach people, and you can often see a light bulb coming on, is it's not an either or, it can be a both and. And in that, what are the opportunities? The second one is this myth that you can escape politics. And this is often where I hear the sounds of hearts breaking, even if it's people 1,000 kilometers away from me on a Zoom call. What? I said, no, look, I'm really sorry. If you've been nurturing and burnishing this fantasy that one day you're going to find this place where there's just no politics, and amen, hallelujah, you can get on with your job, let it go, okay? Because you will always find politics. The question is not whether organizations will have politics, but what kind of politics they're going to have. And so your best bet is to match up your political preferences and style with the kind of political culture that you're going to be walking into. But to wish for a fantasy, good luck, it's never going to happen. And then the third one is a myth of regret. And I'm sad when I hear this because people say, gosh, I wish I'd known this at the beginning of my career. And if I had known it, how different it could have been. And it's this myth that politics don't make a difference to your career or your success. And I love my book title. I think it's genius. But I think the second best book title on the subject is the one by Kathleen Kelly Reardon, where it's called It's All Politics. And the subtitle is Winning in a World Where Talent and Hard Work Are Not Enough. And what she says and what I say, it's not that talent and hard work aren't necessary. Of course they are, but they're not enough. And all things being equal, you can take the technical ability for granted. The differentiator is the political capital that you have or that you don't have.
That is so profound, because I think that's what people really miss. They're like, I'm a hard worker and I'm talented and I've got all this validation around me to show that. And so, why am I not getting on in my career? Often hear that from people. I've reached a ceiling. Other people are being promoted ahead of me. I'm stagnating, or they play favorites. And so there's that, well, if I just work harder, I will be able to rectify the situation which feels unsatisfactory considering my skill and talent. And what you're saying is there's another element that we're not taught, we don't necessarily even know about, that is standing in the like invisible barrier. Can you imagine this, that you're banging on, going, let me out or let me through.
And let me in. Give me a chance.
Let me in, right. So, okay, that is profound. Now I'll let you go on to number 4.
No, but I mean, what you're saying is so important. So let's stay with this for a little while, maybe. Yeah, a few things. I don't know how many times people have said to me, no, I don't have to worry about this stuff because my work will speak for itself. To which I can only reply with the very obvious that work does not speak. Okay? Who is speaking for you and what are they saying? The second one is building on a theme from Carla Harris's brilliant TED Talk. So she, I think, was the first Black female investment banker on Wall Street to get to a very high position, and a very lovely woman from all the stuff that I've seen of her. And she talks about who's in the room for you. And it echoes advice that I was given at the beginning of my career, which is, some of the most important decisions of your career are going to be made when you are not in the room. So who is in that room for you and what are they saying? Now, that is not something in job descriptions or formal responsibilities. That's about influence and power and reputation and relationships as to who's going to be saying what for you. I think the third thing is, particularly with women, but not only with women, and of course not with all women, but particularly with women. Sally Krawcheck wrote a wonderful article a few years ago on LinkedIn called "The Single Biggest Mistake I've Seen Women Make at Work." And she went on to say that the mistake was that we treat work like school. So exactly to your point, if I put my head down and I just work really hard, somebody's going to notice and they're going to give me an A. And that's simply not how work works. Work is not school. But no one, as you say, tells you this. And for me, it's amazing how hardwired it is in so many people. So I'll tell you a quick story of two young graduates who were at a bank that I was at, both chartered accountants, so both very smart, in the graduate program, so early 20s. This young girl came to me. I mean, she's in her early 20s, so I'll call her a young girl, young woman, came to me and she said, I'm really struggling because I'm smart, I'm capable, I got higher marks all through university, I got higher performance appraisals and all the stuff that I've done, in all the work that I've done as a chartered accountant. But this guy that I was at university with is like a rock star. We're in the same graduate program in this bank. And I walk down the passage and people know him, people from outside of our division, people more senior to us. He's being invited here, there, everywhere. And she said, and I don't understand it because technically I am a better chartered accountant. So I said, oh. So she said, I went to him and I asked him, what are you doing? How come you're so well known and all kinds of opportunities seem to be opening up for you? And he said to me, I just make sure that my boss knows what I'm doing and that my boss's boss knows what I'm doing. So I listened to this. I'm like, okay. And then she looked at me. She said, no, but isn't that disgusting? And I thought, gosh, she didn't say that the way that he did it was disgusting and totally overbearingly obnoxious. She just said that he owned his reputation and owned his impact and made sure that other people were aware of it. And I thought, gosh, good news is that you're so young, you can hopefully change this. But the bad news is that you are so young and this distaste, any owning your value is so hardwired.
I do think that is that distaste for maneuvering and for promoting oneself. I definitely see that in certain cultures, less so in American culture. I think it's definitely people, particularly women, are considered less distasteful, but definitely that idea of over promotion, that's kind of looked down on. And so when is it considered smart and savvy? And when is it considered butt kissing in order to get ahead? Is there anything bad about doing some good ingratiating behavior?
So a couple of things, Debbie. I think, and interestingly, yes, I think there are cultural nuances. And just this week, lectured to a group of women, very senior women, all in the US. And this was as much a revelation to them as it is to most people and women. So I think it starts with why. Why am I doing this? Is it so that I can build some leverage so that I can benefit myself and my team? Or is it purely about being sycophantic? Now, I'm not sure anyone who is a sycophant would admit it to themselves, but often people who have got this aversion, when I say to them, why would you do this? Why would you need to do this? How would it benefit you? And if you can focus on that and then start to engage in the activities that will help you, being very clear in your intentions and your motives, that can make things a whole bunch easier. Often I find people saying, oh, it's about self-promotion. Well, yes, self-promotion also has an element of something distasteful. And so it's also important for me that people look at how they frame things. Because if I see it as self-promotion, I'm probably going to do it with my teeth gritted if I do it at all. Whereas if I see it as, listen, invisible contributions have no value. So do I know what my contribution is, and can I own it?
Invisible contributions have no value. If it is not seen, it cannot be valued. And so, how do you make your contribution seen so that it can be valued and appreciated by your colleagues and superiors and yourself, actually?
And so the answer for that is it depends. It's contextual, right? It depends on what your preferences are, how far you're prepared to go. It depends on the context as well. I mean, what will be completely acceptable with one manager in one context will be completely frowned upon in another one. I mean, I've seen that in my career, where in one environment, the behavior that I engaged in was lauded and seen as why I was brilliant in the job. I go to another environment and people think I'm trying to run the place. So you have to figure it out for yourself. What about this feels distasteful? Is it an assumption or is it real? How much of this am I prepared to flex? And how much of this am I prepared to own? Like I said, do I know what I've actually contributed to this organization? And outcome is not the same as output. Don't tell me how busy you've been. Tell me what you've achieved. And then who is it that needs to hear this? And how are they best likely to receive it? And when are they best likely to hear it? So, again, one of the most interesting successful, astonishingly impressive people I've ever met, and we both know her, in fact, told me once that at the beginning of her career, she sat down and she said, every month, I'm going to get deliberate about this. I don't know what prompted her to do this, actually. I should have asked her, but she said, every month, I'm going to think about who do I need to have a meeting with to tell them what I'm doing. It wasn't just her manager. To tell them what I'm doing, to ask for their help, to get their advice, to sell some things that I think they need to know about. So who do I need to have a meeting with? Who do I need to have lunch with? Whatever it was. Every month she did that. And all of a sudden at 45, she's in the exco of a 60,000 strong organization. Or maybe it wasn't so all of a sudden because she was so deliberate around intentional. And this wasn't just an afterthought, it was a practice. So it depends.
So I want to just dig into another layer of this idea of invisible contribution and needing to not just be seen, but actually communicate what you're doing and how you're working to relevant people and stakeholders in the world that we are finding ourselves now, which is hybrid or remote. Because right now, what I'm seeing is that there are constituencies, communities, certain groups of people who are unable to really build their professional, or in this case, political capital in an organization because they're isolated. They maybe are working in their sort of insular teams, and so their own teams might know what they're doing. But beyond that, they don't have the opportunity to engage in the way that they might have in person. To add to that, we also know that when the option exists for remote or in person, is that there are more women who are choosing the remote flexible options because they usually carry the burden and additional load of kids and home and all the rest. And so they are, in fact, I mean, there's already data out about how they are being disadvantaged from career. In fact, anybody who's choosing remote versus in person is being disadvantaged regarding career promotions and opportunities. So let's bring it to now, because that's I mean, it's hard enough navigating when you're in person, but now I think many people have thought, oh, this is great. I don't have to deal with office politics. I'm at home. But let's just talk about that. It's so important right now.
The myth is that politics disappear in a virtual environment, and exactly to your point, they don't. So yes, before COVID and the associated lockdowns, there was a lot of research already that people who take on remote work are disadvantaged, both in terms of their engagements, but also in terms of perceptions. They're not that committed. Oh, apparently they're working.
Apparently. Yeah, sure. And the little inverted air commas,
yes.
Right?
Yes, yeah, that lot. And we're in the office and they're doing whatever they're doing. So, I think, of course, COVID changed that for pretty much the entire working world, other than those essential services that couldn't work from home. But yes, I think what I've seen in my work is that the form of how people build influence has changed, but the need for it hasn't. And so if you never saw the need for it, you probably saw this as a great relief. Oh, hallelujah. No office politics. But if you have seen the need for it, then you've found different ways of making it work for you. So in my experience, people have become a lot more intentional and deliberate around who they're picking up the phone to, who they're engaging with beyond the meeting, about something as small as putting your camera on in the meeting. I mean, it still blows my mind how many meetings I go to, and it's just a circle with initials. I mean, invisible contributions from invisible people. Let's amplify how little value that has, you know. And I think also there are so many opportunities now that I've certainly seen some people actually have used this time to burnish their image and their reputation. I mean, social media has many ills. Let's not even get started. But it is also an amazing platform to showcase your thoughts, to showcase your experience, and who you are, and to build your brand. And in that, to understand who it is you could and should be reaching out to as well. Because building your political capital in your organization is really important, of course. And so getting deliberate and intentional about who should I be engaging with, and doing some homework, because it's not going to happen automatically. The kind of creative collisions at the water cooler that McKinsey talks about. Yes, you have to think about it. But there's interesting research repeatedly that it's actually the weak ties in your network, the people who don't see you all the time, who don't know you all that well, that actually can benefit you more in your network, because being on the periphery, they see different things, they know different things to what you do, and so they can give you opportunities you may not have had access to otherwise, information that you won't normally come across. And so I think there's multiple ways of doing it, but it requires a real step change in effort and deliberateness, as opposed to just hoping for the best if I bump into somebody in the coffee shop. Yeah, so the fifth one is this idea that political intelligence is a trait that you're born with. Lucky you if you have it. Oh, sorry, better luck next time if you don't. No, it's a
bit
skill.
like leadership qualities, right?
Yeah. Or in my case, long legs. I put in an order, next time around, I'm having long legs. But in this time around, I don't. Okay, this is a skill. And like with all skills, if you want to learn it, you can. It takes application, it takes effort, it takes practice, but it is a skill. And so, yes, it is a skill that comes more easily, more naturally to some people. But it is a skill that everyone can learn. And I've heard very, very interesting experiences shared in workshops, in lectures, about people who have learned a new language. So in South Africa, I mean, you'll know the reality that a lot of manufacturing industries are Afrikaans speaking. People who never spoke Afrikaans learned to speak Afrikaans. It wasn't officially required, but they knew, if I'm going to form relationships and form networks here, I need to have an in, and not speaking the language, even though the language of business is English. The informal language is Afrikaans. People learned the language. People took up a hobby that they wouldn't have been interested in otherwise. And as I say that, though, let me really push back very strongly to this whole idea, oh, well, I don't play golf and I don't mountain bike, therefore I'm excluded. Well, maybe you are. In which case, do you want to learn those things? Or maybe you're not. Because, we all have the potential to form human connections and find areas of interest and find areas of common concern with other people, particularly at work. What is it that people are trying to achieve? So often this thing that, well, I don't play golf or I don't smoke, I hear it, and I have to say it rubs me up the wrong way, because it's more of an excuse than a reason. People are people. There are connection opportunities everywhere. How do you find them and maximize them?
As you're saying that, I'm realizing how many times I've actually said I don't do golf. And I definitely don't smoke. So, but there's the coffee machine. I realize it has been a bit of an excuse for me. I mean, I am a shocking golf player. So it would be more of an embarrassment than anything else. It would not do my reputation any good. Absolutely. That would be a very embarrassing experience for me. But I know that I have actually used that as an excuse, because I find networking quite hard. And the idea of needing to spend the whole day on a golf course that whole idea of that activity is just so horrific to me that I've absolutely used that as an excuse to not engage in that. And I've said, well, the business gets done on the golf course, therefore I'm excluded from that type of business engagement. And that's bullshit, actually. If I'm saying no to golf for justifiable reasons, I should need to find my alternatives in other ways, which I guess I have. As you've been talking, I've been thinking about what could people do right now. There have been a few little sort of nuggets that you've dropped through the conversation, and I love to consolidate towards the end. It's been entertaining and informative, but what are the things that we should be thinking about doing right now for somebody who's going, okay, I've just God, this has been such an aha for me. I'm doing politics, so let me do it well in a way that works for me. And there could be some small shifts that we could all be taking to help ourselves navigate the complexity of our work worlds.
I think there's three things. The first is awareness. So either the awareness is, oh, I have been doing politics and therefore let me do it well, or I haven't, and hold on a second, there's a whole universe of possibilities here that I'm missing out on. I need to get deliberate and intentional and smarter around this stuff. So for me, the awareness, whatever awareness it is already, you've moved somewhere along the line of learning. And that's valuable. The second thing then is, okay, so now I'm aware, let me start to assess myself. So if people go to my website, there's a free workbook that they can download. There's 9 exercises that they can go through, understanding how much power do they have, what kind of network do they have, auditing their network, looking at the leverage that they have. So really nice opportunities to reflect on themselves, their styles, their preferences, and the context that they're in. And then the last thing is we'll now start to take action. And so the last exercise as well is around your political strategy and crafting that. What are you trying to achieve, either in this job or in this quarter or with this project, whatever frame of reference you have for what you're trying to achieve? Who do you need on side? Who's against you? How do you maximize the support, minimize the opposition? How do you use your finite energy wisely? Because there's infinite demands on it. How do you stay focused? And how do you use your leverage? All of which, becomes a lot clearer once you've gone through the exercises. And of course, the answer will be different for everyone. So for me, awareness, assessment, action, and that action really continues for the rest of your career though.
Right. Okay, so we will put it in the show notes, but if you're listening, it's Niven Postma, POSTMA.com, for access to a new world of how to navigate corporate politics well. I've actually seen some of those exercises and worksheets. They're really, really amazing. Definitely put your damn video on when you're in the call. Let people see you. If you want to be more invisible than you might already be, that's just like one amazing tip. A lot of people have gone, I don't want to do video. But hey, you've got to be seen in order to get out there. And then there've just been so many other amazing insights during the session. So thank you so much. For listeners who are interested in engaging with Niven for speaking or workshops or all the rest, she's available all over the world. And so you should definitely make contact. That's nivenpostma.com. And thank you so much. I have had the best time talking with you today.
Oh, and I always have a great time talking to you. Likewise.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging around all the way to the end. It would mean the world if you would rate and review on Work and Revolution on your favorite listening app. It helps people know that the show is worth listening to. And so I'll really appreciate that. Thank you so much.